Hello, everyone. This is My Two Cents. For this week's stream, we're going to talk about something I find pretty interesting. And that is because for the past 4 years, anyone who hasn't been living under a rock is well aware that every mainstream media talking head, every blue-haired feminist, every pot-smoking college kid who supports Bernie Sanders has told us nonstop that Donald Trump was and is Adolf Hitler. He is literally Hitler, and anyone who supports him is a fascist. Therefore, of course, we are justified in rising up and taking him down, whatever the cost. And anyone who supported Biden in this past presidential election has been celebrating ever since it was announced that he won the election, that we have toppled the dictator. We have defeated fascism. This is the rise of a new era of peace because the most supreme evil who has ever ruled the United States of America has been toppled. Well, fortunately for us, there is a little thing called history we can examine. We know quite a bit about Adolf Hitler, who he was and what he supported. So we can actually ask the question, now that Joe Biden has been in office a week, examining Donald Trump's presidential record and examining what Joe Biden has done for the past week, can we draw any conclusions about who between the two really has been acting more like Adolf Hitler? Now, I want to be clear up front. I am no fan of Donald Trump. Anyone who's watched my videos over the past couple of years knows I criticized him frequently, be it for his tariffs or other economic incompetencies, his failure to end foreign conflicts. And I mean, there's plenty you can criticize Donald Trump on. But the purpose of this stream is really is not to criticize one or the other, just to ask the question, if we're going to talk about Adolf Hitler as a historical figure, which of the two figures, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, has really acted more like Adolf Hitler? So we're going to start taking a look at this article here. How did Hitler happen? From the National World War II Museum in New Orleans. I'll read just a few pieces in this article that I think are relevant to this discussion. So starting off here, Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor of Germany in 1933 following a series of electoral victories by the Nazi Party. He ruled absolutely until his death by suicide in April of 1945. Upon achieving power, Hitler smashed the nation's democratic institutions and transformed Germany into a war state, intent on conquering Europe for the benefit of the so-called Aryan race. His invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, triggered the European phase of World War II. During the course of the war, Nazi military forces rounded up and executed 11 million victims they deemed inferior or undesirable, life unworthy of life, among them, of course, Jews, Slavs, homosexuals, and Jehovah's Witnesses. He goes on to ask, well, how was it possible for Hitler to rise to power? Hitler rose to power through the Nazi Party, an organization he forged after returning as a wounded veteran from the annihilating trench warfare of World War I. He and other patriotic Germans were outraged and humiliated by the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which the Allies compelled the new German government, the Weimar Republic, or the Weimar Republic, however you pronounce that, to accept, along with an obligation to pay $33 billion in war reparations. Germany also had to give up its prized overseas colonies and surrender valued parcels of home territory to France and Poland. The German army was radically downsized, and the nation forbid to have submarines or an air force. We shall squeeze the German lemon until the pipsqueak, explained one British official. Talks about Hitler was a mesmerizing public speaker, riled up quite a bit of influence. Hitler blamed the Weimar Republic's weaknesses on the influence of Germany's Jewish and communist minorities, who he claimed were trying to take over the country. There are only two possibilities, he told a Munich audience in 1922, either victory of the Aryan or annihilation of the Aryan and the victory of the Jew. Interesting there, considering all the conversation that's going on about race in America. The white cisgendered male kind of taking that place of all the evil, and the only victory for the black man, for the homosexual, for the other races who have been oppressed is to take down the white cisgendered male. Definitely a similarity there. By 1932, the Nazis were the largest political party in the Reichstag. In January of the following year, with no other leader able to command sufficient support to govern, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler Chancellor of Germany. Shortly thereafter, a fire broke out in the Reichstag building in Berlin, and authorities arrested a young Dutch communist who confessed to starting it. He used this episode to convince President Hindenburg to declare an emergency decree suspending many civil liberties throughout Germany, including freedom of the press, freedom of expression, and the right to hold public assemblies. The police were authorized to detain citizens without cause, and the authority usually exercised by regional governments became subject to control by Hitler's national regime. Almost immediately, Hitler began dismantling Germany's democratic institutions and imprisoning or murdering his chief opponents. When Hindenburg died the following year, Hitler took the title of Fuhrer, Chancellor, and Commander-in-Chief of the Army. He expanded the army tremendously, reintroduced conscription, and began developing a new air force, all in violation of the Treaty of Versailles. Now think about this for a minute. So the Nazis have taken power. Hitler has been appointed Chancellor of Germany. Shortly thereafter, a fire breaks out in the Reichstag building in Berlin, and authorities arrest a young Dutch communist, the Communist Party, of course, being one of Hitler's primary, if not the primary opposition he was facing at the time. A communist confesses to starting it. And of course, this great danger to the fledgling nation of Germany now, not a riot, but a fire breaking out at an important government building by the Reichstag. Well, we've got to protect the freedoms and of Germany by, of course, suspending the civil liberties of many Germans. Among Germany, there could be many traitors, many terrorists, people who must be stopped, or else our great nation will fall. And of course, this justifies censoring the press, censoring freedom of expression, holding public assemblies. The police can detain you without cause, all in the name of protecting the government and furthering, national success. Reminds me kind of how shortly on January 6th, we have a riot at the U.S. Capitol building. We're told that this is 100% certain these people are Donald Trump supporters. They are trying to overturn the results of a legitimate democratic election. And this, of course, justifies the FBI, Department of Homeland Security, looking into just about anyone who might support Donald Trump, because any such person could be a domestic terrorist. They could be a threat to the nation of the United States. So let's take a look at let's look at something else that's been shared here. I'm sure many of you have probably seen this, but we have former CIA Director John Brennan from the Obama administration said in an earlier appearance on MSNBC this week, he said this: "We are now looking forward to that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of the country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, and even libertarians." Yes, John Brennan is afraid of libertarians. God forbid that people who just want you to be left alone are scary. But that is what the former CIA director under John Brennan said. Well, what has the Biden administration said so far? Let's take a look. We have here on NPR, Biden administration announces plans to assess domestic violent extremism. And of course, there's a picture there of rioters and U.S. Capitol Police and Trump flags and all that, so that everyone knows Trump supporters clash with police and security forces as they storm the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Biden's chief opponents, the Trump supporters, are, of course, now domestic terror threats that must be dealt with. Biden has asked the Director of National Intelligence to draw up a comprehensive threat assessment on domestic violent extremism in the country as the new administration seeks to tackle what it calls a serious and growing national security threat. The move is one of several, the White House press secretary announced Friday, to address mounting concerns about domestic extremism, particularly in the wake of the violent insurrection more than 2 weeks ago by Trump supporters at the U.S. Capitol. The Biden administration will confront this threat with the necessary resources and resolve, Press Secretary Jen Psaki. I don't know how you pronounce that. Psaki. We are committed to developing policies and strategies based on facts, on objective and rigorous analysis, and on our respect for constitutionally protected free speech and political activities. Yeah, tell me about it. So supporting Donald Trump, of course, means you could be a domestic terrorist. The document will be coordinated with the FBI and Department of Homeland Security, two agencies we know to already be heavily politicized, and it will draw on the analysis from across the U.S. government and outside organization. Of course, that's referring to his investigations into domestic terrorism. But what about people who merely express pro-Donald Trump views or express disagreement with the Biden administration? Well, let's take a look at another article here. Here we have an article from CNN talking about how Biden addresses the nation's information crisis. We must defeat the lies. In a sharp break with his predecessor, President Joe Biden vowed during his inaugural address Wednesday to tackle the information crisis plaguing American politics and society. We must reject the culture in which facts themselves are manipulated and even manufactured, Biden said shortly after taking the oath as the 46th president. There is truth, Biden added, and there is lies. Biden pointed out that some lies are told for power and other lies are told for profit. Well, he's certainly not wrong about that point, but what is he going to do about it? Is he going to stifle free speech? It was a not so subtle nod at the fact that while politicians wield lies to further their influence, companies like the right-wing cable channel Fox News, how totally right-wing they are, have used lies and conspiracy theories to line the pockets of their owners. Each of us has a duty and a responsibility as citizens, as Americans, and especially as leaders who have pledged to honor our Constitution and protect our nation, to defend the truth and defeat the lies. Well, of course, if defeat lies, he means, putting out fact-based, research-based information that actually refutes the things that other people are saying, fine. But we all know that what he's actually talking about is censoring anyone who disagrees with him. If you are pro-Trump, if you say anything that disagrees with the official narrative put out by the government, then you are dangerous and, you're worthy of the gulag. Not unlike Adolf Hitler, who shortly after taking power had most of his opposition killed or jailed. And there is, of course, also, there was on one other article that I wanted to focus on here. Let's take a look at what came to be called the Night of the Long Knives. So looking here at the Encyclopedia Britannica, the Night of the Long Knives. In German history, a purge of Nazi leaders by Adolf Hitler on June 30th, 1934. Fearing that the paramilitary SA had become too powerful, Hitler ordered his elite SS guards to murder the organization's leaders, including Ernest Röhm. Also killed that night were hundreds of others of perceived opponents to Hitler. By the end of May 1934, Hitler had been chancellor for 16 months and dictator for 14, but two obstacles to his absolute power remained. First, his old comrade Ernest Röhm, chief of staff of the SA, or Brown Shirts. Röhm wanted to have his troops incorporated into the new Wehrmacht that was being prepared to take place in the Reichswehr, despite the fact that the conservative-minded generals were resolutely opposed to any such contamination of the army by the SA. Second, German President Paul von Hindenburg was still alive and in office, and if he wished, could have stopped all of Hitler's plans by handing over power to the Reichswehr. Hitler, knowing that the military strength was necessary for his foreign policy and that antagonizing the generals could be fatal to himself, decided to sacrifice Röhm. Alleging that Röhm was plotting a putsch, Hitler ordered a massacre. On the night of June 30th, 1944, Röhm and many more leaders of the SA were shot by members of Heinrich Himmler's SS. Some of Hitler's other enemies were also murdered, including the last chancellor of the Weimar Republic, Kurt von Schleicher, Gregor Strasser, who until 1932 had been second only to Hitler in the Nazi Party, Bavarian ex-separatist Gustav von Kerr, conservative critic Edgar Jung, and Catholic professor Erich Klauseiner. Vice Chancellor Franz von Papen only narrowly escaped inclusion among these victims, and he was dismissed from the vice chancellorship 3 days later. So, Adolf Hitler, upon taking power, in order to consolidate it, we see where a member of one of his chief opponents, the Communist Party, sets fire to the Reichstag building and then confesses to it. Who knows if he really was responsible or not. But then, of course, this gives rise to justification for narratives like the German state is full of traitors, full of people spreading dangerous misinformation who must be dealt with for the sake of safety. And, within not long, before mass executions, mass censorship of the media, and a Department of Propaganda that puts out the official narrative, you will not question the official narrative, and if you do, you will be done away with. Now, again, Donald Trump was criticized very heavily for 4 years. I mean, did a day go by that the news media didn't say Donald Trump is a horrible, no good, very bad human being and everything he does is totally horrible? No, not a day did. And yet, Donald Trump allowed them to keep speaking. Seems to me that if Donald Trump was anything like Adolf Hitler, the moment he took the presidency, he would have silenced every media outlet in America that opposed him and replaced them with his own media outlets that only forwarded his official state-sanctioned narrative. Now, did Donald Trump put out his own narrative? Sure, but he didn't try to silence people who disagreed. Biden, on the other hand, has been in office about a week now. Already, his administration is talking about looking into the domestic terror threat, and because of what happened on January 6th, anyone who voted for Donald Trump could, of course, be a domestic terror threat. They're talking about combating dangerous misinformation. But we've already seen that by that, they don't mean based on the actions of these big tech companies that are already in the pocket of the politicians, based on all the mainstream media outlets, including Fox News, by the way, that are in the pocket of these politicians. They need to combat the dangerous media narrative. That means shutting down and silencing anyone who disagrees with the official state-sanctioned narrative. I mean, seriously, how many times have you heard people talking about we need to shut down moon hoaxers or anti-vaxxers, or well, maybe anti-vaxxers now, but these crazy fringe groups like moon hoaxers, we never landed on the moon. No one says we need to shut them down because everybody laughs. They know they're a crock. But anyone who questions the official narrative put out by experts like Dr. Fauci, analysts at CNN, and of course now the new sanctioned Biden administration, who, unlike the fascist dictator Donald Trump, only wants what's best for this nation, is talking about censoring anybody who puts out anything that even remotely disagrees with the official state-sanctioned narrative, by force if necessary. One other article I wanted to look at here regarding the National Guard. So the National Guard was called out to defend, of course, the Biden inauguration. And the mayor of Washington, D.C., as well as a number of other leading Democratic politicians, said the National Guard needs to be purged of anyone who might be pulled by other views. Washington, D.C., this comes from the postmillennial.com. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser said in a Tuesday press conference that she wants National Guardsmen to be removed from the force entirely if they hold views she disagrees with. Speaking about National Guardsmen, Bowser said, when you have guardsmen and women coming from all over the nation at this time, I do think that it is prudent to make sure that they are being vetted and that anybody who cannot pledge allegiance to their missions and may be pulled by other views needs to not only be removed from duty, they need to be removed from the Guard. The comments come shortly after the FBI said it was planning to vet National Guardsmen. 2 National Guardsmen were removed from Biden's inauguration due to association with far-right groups. The groups in question, which they were a part of, not specified. And again, did these National Guardsmen actually commit any crimes, or did they just find out through social media or whatever other source that they were associated with people that they consider to be far right, which of course means they might be domestic terrorists? Again, I'll say it again. Donald Trump was in office for 4 years and he was criticized nonstop every single day of his presidency, and never did he try to silence people who disagreed with him. Biden has been in office a week. Already we're talking about purging the military of anyone who's not pro-Biden, investigating anyone who potentially could be a domestic terrorist, which they've already not so quietly through people like John Brennan said anybody who's a Trump supporter, anyone who's a libertarian, even anyone who doesn't stand for Joe Biden and the narrative that Joe Biden represents could potentially be a domestic terrorist and needs to be looked into. And of course, combating dangerous misinformation through the mass censorship of anyone who disagrees with the official narrative. You tell me, folks, Donald Trump or Joe Biden, considering the history we've gone over regarding Adolf Hitler, how he rose to power, and what he first did when he came to power, of the two, which one is really behaving more like Adolf Hitler? Donald Trump or Joe Biden? You people be the judge. And JC Armitage here, I like this comment. It's funny how history repeats itself. Indeed it does. As George Santayana said, and I'm sure he is rolling in his grave, those who cannot learn their history are doomed to repeat it. Star Raptor Flock says virtual book burning. Here we go. And indeed, Adolf Hitler had books burned, much in the same way virtual book burning, the shutting down of websites and social media accounts that differ with the official narrative. The FBI investigating Parler, exactly. Party purging, where have I heard that one before? Exactly. You can all be the judge. Remember, I don't like Donald Trump. I don't like Joe Biden. I don't like either of them. I don't like government, period. That doesn't mean for the record, that does not mean I advocate the use of violence. I do not. I never advocate the use of violence. I'm merely asking the question, of the two leaders, which one really is behaving more like Adolf Hitler? Ladies and gentlemen, you can be the judge, and that is my 2 cents. You can take it for what it's worth.